Welcome to the Teach Joyfully podcast, where we talk about all things elementary teaching with some mom stuff thrown in. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5. I'll be your host. Thanks for joining me. Today is all about teacher self-care. As we head into a new school year with a lot of brand new rules and restrictions, self-care is going to be even more important than it ever has been before. And I have to say, we probably aren't going to magically be any better with self-care than we have in the past without some serious thought and commitment. So I'm asking you to commit to you. Did you know that 40% of teachers leave education in the first 5 years of entering the classroom? Why? Well, teaching's hard, very hard. The pay ranges from pretty good to very poor depending on where you teach, and how much education and certifications you have, and how many years you've taught. The benefits tend to be above average, but the to-do lists are endless. We are asked to do more and more every year, quite often with less. The bathroom breaks are almost non-existent some days, but the kids, they're what make it all worth it. In fact, we do just about anything for our students and often do, even at our own expense. Which means by the middle of the year, we're often surviving, not thriving. What does it take to not just survive the school year, but to thrive all year as an educator? Because honestly, that really is the goal. We love teaching, we do. But in order to love teaching and really be happy and joyful and give our very best all year, we have to realize we simply can't pour from an empty cup. You only get one you. You've got to take care of the you that you've been given. And that means physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, in every single way. So let's begin. Mental health, rejuvenation, and our physical health and exercise are important just as much as the food and water that we drink. Laws of productivity say that we are more productive when we take breaks than we are if we try and power through. Less is more. In fact, it is a proven fact that our productivity actually drops exponentially when we work more than 40 hours a week. Now, I don't know about you, but I know more teachers than not work way more than 40 hours per week. So how do we take that and turn it into something we can actually do and keep our productivity high? Because it's really hard to let go of those to-do lists, and it's really hard to look at all that work and know that there'll just be more. We're always working. One of the first steps is to realize that we are and must be more than a teacher. That's right, more than a teacher. And I know that sounds daunting because it sounds like I'm asking you to do more, but I'm actually asking you to do less of teaching and more of things that you love just for fun. Things like hobbies and other interests, whatever it is that you really enjoy. When we have other interests and we pursue them, we're happier, rejuvenated, more creative, and better able to have perspective and a positive attitude in our work that we really do love. It's easy to get bogged down and overrun and overworked, and then we lose perspective and we start hating the job that we really do love. And that's not where we want to be. So it all starts with a mindset. We have to prioritize. In order to prioritize, we have to commit to our priorities. So first, you have to decide in advance of the school year what your priorities are. Rank all of the things in your life and all of the people in your life. God, you, your spouse, your kids, work, everything that you do, whether you do volunteer work, you have all kinds of other things, and you need to rank them and put them in order so that you know what comes first. And let me tell you a little hint here, work should not be first. Now, I know it's very tempting to put your spouse or family or friends and even your work and your students before yourself. I know that. But I have to tell you, even in a marriage, children who are put before the marriage have an exaggerated view of their importance in the world and are going to be the children of divorce or unhappy marriages full stop. You really do have to put your marriage before your kids, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but if the marriage fails, the kids are not going to be doing well. You have to take care of the marriage. And the same thing is true of you and your work. You must put yourself first before your work, before your students. And I know how hard that is. And it's very tempting to put your students first and put your own needs last. But you need to get rid of the notion that self-care is selfish, because it's not. There is a reason why the airlines tell us to put on our own oxygen mask first before helping others, even your own family members. Why? Because if you quit breathing, you're not good to anyone. You won't be there to help them if you can't breathe, if you suffocate. And that's what we're doing when we put everything else before ourselves. We are suffocating ourselves. So my priority list looks like this. God first, then me, then my spouse, then my kids, and then work. You need to decide what your priority list is. Sit down right now and do it. Just write it down. And then once you have that, then you can remember that you matter. Tell yourself that every single day. I don't know what it is that you want to tell yourself, but write down some things that you love about yourself. And write down the fact that you matter, and read it every single day. It can be 2 sentences, but read it every day to remind yourself that you must take care of yourself first before you can take care of anyone else. Because when you're happy, everyone else will be happier too. So self-care sounds time-consuming, right? We're always crunched for time as teachers. And so I know that I'm going to have a few teachers out there that are saying, Lisa, I don't have time for self-care. Well, if you don't have time for self-care, poor you, because let me tell you, self-care is essential. So you need to decide how you're going to fit that in. And honestly, it shouldn't be fit in. It should be the very first thing we think of. So when are you going to do self-care? You need to schedule it. And the first thing you put on the schedule needs to be your top 2 priorities. I put on my prayer time, and then I put on time for me to do some things that I love. It might just be sitting down for half an hour to read a book every day. But if that makes me happy and helps me feel rejuvenated, then that's what I'll do. Maybe you love a hot bath. Maybe you like a run. Whatever it is that is good for you, then do that. Maybe you like to paint or draw, or you do crafts. Give yourself some time. It doesn't have to be huge, but you need to give yourself some time every single day, every week. That doesn't mean that you're going to hold out until the end of the week. You need to give yourself some time every single day. Maybe you'll do some small things. Maybe it's taking the time to make that cup of coffee that you love in the morning, and then getting yourself to work a little early so you can sit in your room and just be in the quiet before the school gets busy. Maybe that's self-care for you, a chance to sit there and maybe pray or meditate or read a book just for a few minutes. If that's your self-care, then do it. It doesn't have to take a long time, but do what's going to rejuvenate you and help you feel ready for the day and calm. The things that take more time might not be on the weekdays. They might be on the weekends. But whenever it is, schedule it. Put it on your calendar. Because let me tell you, if it is not on the calendar, it is not happening. We need to remember that that to-do list will never end. So we have to step away from the to-do list each day. Have a routine for ending your day and a time you're committed to stopping work each day. It can be different each day of the week, but it needs to be consistent from week to week. So I might stay late on Tuesdays, but I go home at a pretty good hour, not too long after school ends, the rest of the week. Maybe you have 2 days a week that you stay late and get a bunch of work done, but that means that you're committed to not taking work home on the weekend. That is self-care. So for me, self-care means I don't take work home unless it's really urgent, which is almost never. Because honestly, whoever had a grading emergency? I mean, really? So feeling prepared is part of my self-care. That's important to me. Cleaning up the living room when the kids go to bed so I can relax, that's self-care for me. I can't relax in a living room filled with toys and stuff all over. I need neat and tidy. That's important to me. Dishes in the sink, I can't stand them. I can let them go all day, but by the end of the day, they need to be cleaned up because if I get up the next morning and there's dishes in the sink, I feel like yesterday's problems are spilling into today, and that makes me crazy. So that's something I take that extra minute or two to clean the dishes up. In my classroom is the same way. I always made sure it was straightened up and prepped before I left for the day. I had a routine for that. At the end of the day, I knew I was wrapping up my day when I was straightening up and prepping all the things for the next day. It was a 15-minute routine, but it was like gold in my life because that part of the day set me up for success the next day. And that meant that when I came into the classroom, I didn't feel like I was still stepping into the prior day's problems. I was starting fresh each day. So figure out what works for you and what's important to you. You might not have a great need for neat and tidy like I do. And if that's not you, that's fine. But figure out what works for you. Figure out what stresses you out and what makes you feel calm. There's a book that I love. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is an amazing, life-changing book. If you haven't read it, run out and grab it and read it. This is the book to help you create habits that will stick and ones that will be amazing in your life and helpful because habits are autopilot, and I'm all about autopilot. The more things in our life we can put on autopilot, like those mornings and evening routines or after work routine, means you don't think about it, you just do it, and it happens at the same time each day without having to think about one more thing. A habit doesn't become something on your to-do list. It's just something that you do. Something else you need to plan is you need to plan your evening. How are you going to wind down so you can sleep? One of the things I hear from teachers is they're so tired they wind up sitting on the sofa, watching Netflix, maybe having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or tea, and just relaxing. Unfortunately, we're so darn tired, sometimes it's hard to get up off that sofa and get ourselves to bed. And sometimes it feels like that's the only chance we get to just be. And so we extend that time later and later. Unfortunately, that becomes a vicious cycle. The more emotionally tired we are, the more likely we'll stay up late and deprive ourselves of sleep. That cycle is a vicious cycle. When our kids were babies, sleep was the one thing I had to have. I tell new moms all the time, sleep and water are essential. Everything else is optional. And I am a food lover. But even that was considered optional compared to sleep when my kids were babies. Because if I were well rested, I knew the rest would come. I would eat better, I would be happier, calmer, and just more joyful all day long and able to focus. But if I were lacking sleep, I was less focused, more irritable, and more likely to eat junk than good food. And that just becomes one more vicious cycle. The same is true for us as teachers. We must get sleep. It is essential. Sleep and water are essentials. You need plenty of water and you need sleep. Yes, you need food, you need exercise, you need all kinds of things. But if you make those two things priorities in your life, the rest will come. It will. You'll just start taking care of those things and doing a better job with the rest. You must have sleep. And that means you need a routine for the evening. If Netflix is the way that you wind down, great, but put a limit on it. Set a timer and know when that timer rings, you are getting yourself to bed. So the way to get a lot of this done is to set some personal boundaries and adjust them regularly. Some things are finite and time is one of them. We each get 24 hours in a day. No more, no less, 24 hours. And how you're going to spend those hours is entirely up to you. But let me tell you, the first thing I schedule is 8 hours of sleep. If I get 7, fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. But anything less than that is unacceptable. I'm just a wreck. It doesn't go well if I don't get enough sleep. You might think that you can operate on 4, 5, or even 6 hours of sleep, and there are very few people in the world who can. They honestly can. But honestly, most people can't. You might be kidding yourself that you're doing great on that amount of sleep, but over time, that's going to wear on you. And let me give you a little tidbit. Did you know that people who get less sleep throughout their life tend to have more dementia when they're older? Yeah, how scary is that? Get your sleep, get it in now. You need it. One of the things that I also tell teachers is, what are you complaining about? When we are constantly complaining, even just in our own heads, those kinds of things are clues. Those are things that are hints to what's really going on and where there's things that are broken in our lives. If we're always complaining about money, quit spending money on your classroom. You don't have to keep up with the teacher next door. Just pare down. We do not have to spend money on our classrooms. We do not have to spend money for a lot of these things. Yes, there are children who are going to come to school and won't have some of the things that they need, but it is not your job to provide them. If you can afford it, by all means do. But if you can't, then you're depriving yourself of something and making yourself resentful, and that isn't good either. Do what you can and move on. You can ask other people to provide for that. Find creative ways for other people to help you out with some of those things if you feel like they're essential but you can't afford it. But be honest with yourself about your money and your budget. Time. Time is something that we complain about a lot. We need to pare down. If we're constantly complaining about time, even in our own heads, and feeling stressed out about it, then we need to pare down what we're doing down to the basics. We make time for ourselves first, we schedule that, and then we fill in the rest of the day. So that means you're going to schedule your sleep, schedule some self-care time, and then fill in the rest of your day. Train your students. Training your students very thoroughly in the beginning of the year, and that means not just the first week. Training your students well really requires the first month. And I know that seems like you're spending a lot of time training your students when you could be teaching. But let me tell you, the everyday annoyances can break you over the course of a year. If you can train your students really well in that first month, it will pay off all year long in instructional time. Take the time to invest in training your students well. Personal boundaries are really important, and that means boundaries in your classroom as well. So decide what your boundaries are and really train your students so that your classroom runs the way you want it to. You can do it, your students can do it, but you have to invest that kind of time. Something else that I tell teachers all the time is a happy teacher is a good teacher. As a mom of 5, I can say I've had my kids in the unhappy teacher's classroom and in the happy teacher's classroom. And let me tell you, that year in the unhappy teacher's classroom is a soul-sucking, self-esteem destroying experience. It is. I've watched unhappy teachers tear into kids for doing childish things. They're children. What are the chances they're going to make childish mistakes? Well, I'd say 100%. If we're going to get upset about every childish mistake and really tear into kids, we shouldn't be there. So here's the cure for that. Check in with yourself on your drive home. Does that mean that we're going to never make mistakes? Yeah, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have bad days. We are going to do things and say things sometimes that we are going to regret. We cannot beat ourselves up over it. However, we can make changes and try very hard not to do it again. And when we get up, we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and reevaluate and find a better way and try again. But if we just continue on without changing anything, that's when things go horribly wrong. Check in with yourself every single day. It can be on your drive home, before bed, whenever, but schedule an appointment with yourself for 5 minutes to check in with yourself. How are you feeling? How are you feeling all day? Did you have any moments that you felt like didn't go well? What needs to change? I like this method. Give yourself 2 wins in a row. Find 2 great things about the day and congratulate yourself and really enjoy that. And remember, those are things you want to do again. And then give yourself a grow and really check in with yourself. What is it that didn't go well that you need to change so that it can go better the next day? And more often than not, it has something to do with your personal boundaries. When we check in with ourselves, we're also checking to make sure that the boundaries are in place where they belong. And that can often mean that we might need to change some of the things that we're doing in our classroom or that our students are doing, and we might need to retrain. Because the reality is, when someone treads on our boundaries, whether we knew it was a boundary or not, we start getting very upset, and that's normal. But we do need to figure that out so that we can make the change. I want to imagine your day like the battery on your laptop or your phone. You start out at 100%. As the day goes on, you slowly lose battery life. If you take a break at lunch or just sit in the dark in the classroom or read a chapter of the favorite novel or chat with a colleague and eat without doing any work, just recharge your battery. Those things do recharge your battery. You gain some battery life, and it helps you sustain you throughout the rest of the day. Taking even a couple minutes is essential. It's going to get hard as things change. You may have your students eating in your classroom this year. How are you going to get that time? You're going to need to talk to your administration, and you're going to need to talk to other teachers and figure that out. Some way, somehow, we have to make sure you're getting the breaks that you need, even if it's only a couple minutes. We'll make the most of every second we can get so that we can have a sustainable life throughout this crazy school year. One of my very favorite strategies is saying no. It is a really hard word to say. I know, 2 little letters, but it can be so hard to say. As teachers, we tend to want to make sure that everyone else is taken care of, and so we say yes more than we ever should. But here's the thing. It's much easier to say no first to pretty much everything. If you change your mind later and say yes, you look like a hero. But if you say yes first to just about everything, what happens is you wind up getting overwhelmed and stuck with things that you can't or maybe don't want to do, and you don't wind up with any time for yourself. It's really hard to go back later and tell somebody no. But if you start with no and you go back and say yes later, you look like a hero. Plus, if you say no and stick to your no, they quit asking after a while. So let me tell you, start with no every single time. My friends and family and all my colleagues know that I will say no more than I say yes, because every no that you say is a yes to something else, and every yes that you say is a no to something else. You can't do everything, so either you're saying yes to a lot of things and no to yourself, or you're saying yes to yourself and no to some other things. That doesn't mean you're never going to say yes. It just means you're going to be choosy. As a mom, here's a little tip. Buy the cookies, pay the fee, quit trying to do everything. If you as a mom are always saying, yes, I'll make cookies, and yes, I'll do these other things, at some point you simply can't do it all, not and teach and have a life and spend time with your kids. If you love to bake cookies, by all means, bake cookies. But if you really don't have the time and that just makes you feel exhausted, check in with yourself. Take a minute before saying yes and think, can I really do this? How does this make me feel when I think about it? If you're feeling a little bit anxious or stressed, say no. Now let's take a minute and chat about the dreaded committees. As teachers, We get volunteered or asked to volunteer for a lot of things, including committees and extra duties and all kinds of things. Some things we simply don't have any choice in. We have to do some of those things. But sometimes we have a choice about which things we get to do. Know in advance what you're willing to do in addition to teaching. What can you handle? If you can say no to things, and that's okay, say no. But if you really do have to take on some extra duties, which most of us do, decide before the school year starts which ones you'd prefer to do so you can be more joyful in them. And then be the first to volunteer for that thing that you want to do so you don't get stuck with the thing you loathe. So another note about scheduling. As you're creating your schedule and you're getting time for you and time for all of your activities and teaching and everything else that you need to do on your schedule, something else you need to think about is leaving some white space. What is white space? Well, white space means that you're leaving some space throughout your day when there is nothing scheduled, even if it's just a couple minutes in between things. When you stack your day full, back to back, from one thing to the next, you never get a chance to breathe, and neither do your students. I am all about having a sense of urgency while we're teaching. I believe that we have a lot to accomplish, and we really need to keep it moving. But we do need some white space, and so do your students. You need time to breathe. Not only does it give you time to breathe, but when things aren't going right or you need to make adjustments, it gives you that flexibility in your day to do that. Even if it's just something that you forgot and you need to add in, suddenly there's time. So give yourself a little bit of grace and a little bit of white space in your day. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, self-care and social distancing. There's all kinds of new restrictions that are going to put new pressure on teachers. We need to make sure that we're advocating for ourselves and for our colleagues. Yes, everyone's going to need to give a little, but teachers have given, and we have to make sure we protect our boundaries. So know in advance, before the school year starts, 1, what your boundaries are, 2, what you need in order to have a sustainable life and do some self-care, and 3, what you're willing to give on and what is non-negotiable. I'm sorry, but teachers, bathroom breaks are non-negotiable. You must have bathroom breaks throughout the day. You must have time to go get a fresh cup of water if, in fact, that's something that you need to do and you don't have water in your classroom. You need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself with masks and sanitizing stations and all the things that you need in order to feel safe in your classroom as well, and for your students to feel safe in the classroom. What kinds of things are going to help you and your students have a good year and be safe? We realize that at some point we might go back online. In all honesty, I do believe that we will all go back online at least for a time during this school year. We need to be ready. Talk to your admin, talk to your colleagues, work out a plan, and be ready. But in the meantime, we need to take care of ourselves in our school buildings as best we can. Is there no recess or lunch break because you're eating with your students? How are you going to get a break? This is an important question, and sometimes it's not because our admin doesn't care about us. It's simply that they're trying to make everything work, and they forget that teachers need a break too. If no one speaks up, nothing will get done. You've got to have a minute or two in your day in order to sit down and have a break and take a breath. No one can be with a group of students an entire school day without a break. You just can't. So make sure that you're talking to your admin about that and figuring that out. The last piece is leaving work at work. I know with all of these new restrictions, there's no breaks during the day. Not really. You'll have some breaks here and there, but those are going to be self-care breaks. Don't stack it full of work. So when you get those breaks, you're going to take care of you. But how are you going to manage to leave work at work? Because self-care and social distancing are going to take more time. you're going to need to leave time to get your work done as well. And that means planning and grading. I like to do planning and grading either early in the morning, coming in early, or staying late a day or two. I get it all done, and I always leave it all at school. This means that I have a system in order to be able to get it all organized. Every time a set of papers is turned in that I'm going to be grading, I have folders specifically for those things already prepared with any kind of rubrics or grading keys that I need already in there, or at least a post-it with the teacher's manual page number so that I know I can grab it and go. Then on that day that I'm staying late, I do all the grading then. I just set it aside and let it go until that day. I do it all, and it all gets sent back out to students from there. It is the easiest way to stay on top of things without taking work home. This is an essential piece of self-care. Why? With being online, doing blended learning, or being in the classroom with new restrictions, our lives can get kind of blended together. Your work life can bleed into your personal life, and it's really hard to draw the line. You need to set firm boundaries on where those lines are. Are you going to stay late on Tuesdays, or if you're working from home online, is Tuesday the day you're going to do all your grading and you'll work later that day? Fine, do that on Tuesdays, but the rest of the week, you're not going to touch it. You're simply going to put it in the proper folders, have it ready to go, and then you'll do it all on that day. Maybe you need to do 2 days a week. That's fine, but don't let it bleed into more than 2 days a week. Otherwise, you're going to be working all the time. You do not need to be available for parents and students every single second. I don't care what anyone else tells you. You have got to remember that yes, when they're blended learning or when they're online, parents and students are going to need some extra support, especially in the beginning of the year. But you tell them how to treat you by the boundaries you set. If you set firm boundaries and you let them know, this is the time that I have lunch from 12 to 1 o'clock, I am unavailable then. Let them know in advance and stick to it. Do not answer any emails or however their parents are communicating with you. Do not answer during that time. Take that break. And then you can deal with it a little bit later. If they know that you're responsive the rest of the day, they'll give you that grace. The same thing's true with the end of the school day and the beginning of the school day. Decide at what time you're willing to start working and willing to quit working, and make sure you stick to that. Yes, you're going to be working early a lot, but does that mean that you're going to be answering parent requests too during that time? Or are you not? Make sure you know where your boundaries are and multiply that by the entire school year. Because the reality is, it may seem fine today, but 3 months from now, it might not be fine anymore. So start out very conservatively. You can always add in more time later on. So no first, yes later, if that's still okay with you. So let's wrap up just a little bit. Imagine you have a large cup of water. You sip from it all day long. By the end of the school day, it's getting a little low. You go home and you have 2 choices. You can fill that cup back up by getting some self-care and taking a break, or you can ignore it. When you get up in the morning, you get to have whatever water is in your cup for the rest of the day. Which cup do you want? The full one or the one that's just the leftovers from the previous day? That's self-care. I want you to remember that image and keep it in your head throughout the school year, and remember, you matter and your self-care matters, and you need to fill your cup first before you can pour into anybody else's. So do a mindset check every day. Check regularly. If you're complaining even in your head, something's wrong, something's broken, and you need to take the time to think what it is and fix it. Leave some white space in your day. This gives you some flexibility if things come up, but it also gives you a chance to take a breath, and it gives your students a chance to. Stacking things back to back throughout your day with no possible chance for even a short break is stressful for you and stressful for your students. One thing I know for certain, we don't need any more stress in our day. Decide what self-care looks like for you. What works for me may or may not work for you. Know what you need and what works for you, how often you need it, and when, what time of day each day you will provide some self-care for yourself. Yes, some days it might not work out, but if you're scheduling and you're getting that most days, life will be good. Schedule you first and then put the rest in. Set your boundaries, your personal life, school life, and in your classroom. Know what's okay with you and what's not okay. And remember to continue to check in with yourself every day. Train your students. Really take the time to do this well. I don't mean train your students for a week at the beginning of the school year. That is not enough. I don't care how nice a class you have got to spend the entire first month training your students. I get that this feels like you're losing a lot of instructional time in that first month. It doesn't matter if you're working online, you're doing a blended classroom, or you're working in the classroom. Train your students. They need it. That entire first month. It is an investment that will pay off in more instructional time and less frustrations all year long. Invest in this now. As you learn what school will look like for you this year, make some decisions on how to take care of you. Advocate for yourself and for your colleagues if you have to. It's really important that we take care of you, our teachers. Celebrate what's going right. I like the 2 wins and a grow strategy. At the end of each day, it can be even before bed if that's when it works out for you. Think about 2 wins, 2 great things from the day that were wins, and then 1 thing to help you grow. If you do this, you will keep on growing and your days and weeks will turn into something wonderful because you'll take the time to celebrate what's going right too. And that's it, my friends. The link to James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is in the show notes. I also have a quick self-care quiz that's linked in the show notes as well. You can find those at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. As always, you can grab all my freebies at www.hopeineducation.com/vault. That link is in the show notes as well. So that's it, my teacher friends. We're out of time and I am out of breath. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, I'd love it if you'd go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave a review. While you're there, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Also, you can continue the conversation online with me in my Facebook group, the Teach Joyfully podcast community, where elementary teachers can connect, get help, and encouragement for all kinds of education and parenting topics. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.